So we're kickstarting with this archive site that shines a light on Africa's deep historical roots. And it's like, a portal into the lost libraries of Timbuktu and beyond.
Absolutely. It's intriguing to see a site that reminds us that Africa is way more than the narratives we've been fed, and it highlights civilizations that went back millennia.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this fascinating range from the ancient kingdoms like Tasseti in Nubia, which might be the earliest state ever, to the flourishing empires of Ghana, Mali, and even Ethiopia.
Right, and it's like when you consider how these empires had advanced political and economic systems, it really challenges the narrow views pushed by earlier historians.
And I love how the content emphasizes that long before external interference, Africa had these robust civilizations, developing technologies, writing systems, and trade networks that spanned across continents.
For sure. And it's almost ironic to think that while some critics, like Hume and Hegel, dismissed Africa's history, this site provides evidence of complexities, like advanced mathematical knowledge in kemet and early state formation in Tasseti, that laid foundations for science and politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're opening a treasure chest of historical wealth. And each artifact or link, even though some might be broken, tells the story of a legacy that's been obscured by later distortions from the transatlantic slave trade era.
Exactly. And while the site notes it's archived and not actively maintained, even that little disclaimer kinda sets the stage for a discussion on the fragility of historical records, reminding us that history can be lost as easily as it is misrepresented.
Right. And it also points out the shift in narratives. Like, up until recently, many wrongly claimed that Africa was without a writing tradition, when in reality, there were ancient libraries, documented treaties, and vast repositories of knowledge, such as those in Timbuktu.
Yeah, it makes you think how much we owe to these early record keepers and scholars who meticulously recorded everything from astronomy to philosophy.
Absolutely. And between the early achievements in engineering like pyramid construction and innovations in writing and calendar systems, there's clear evidence that Africa was once the cradle of human ingenuity.
And not only that, there's a whole narrative on trade. How gold and commerce drove empires like Mali to grow so vast that even Mansa Musa's pilgrimage caused economic ripples in Cairo, which is just mind-blowing.
And speaking of trade, it's like these empires were intricately connected, trading with places as far as India and China long before European ships even appeared, which definitely challenges the conventional Eurocentric views of history.
Right, but I do want to challenge one thing. While these narratives are robust, sometimes I feel the presentation might lean heavily on recounting civilization achievements without equally underscoring the diversity of smaller, non-centralized societies like the Igbo or other communities with participatory governance.
That's a valid point. It's like sometimes we focus on the grand empires, and we risk overlooking the rich tapestry of decentralized, yet incredibly vibrant societies that operated on principles of democratic decision-making through councils of elders.
Exactly. Those small societies had systems of governance and communal responsibilities that were equally innovative, emphasizing a shared sense of identity and tradition.
And then there's the role of Islam and Christianity, right? I mean, the spread of Islam through trade and also the influence of the Orthodox Christian Church in Ethiopia shows a fascinating blend of indigenous traditions with external religious influences, building cultural and political institutions that were uniquely African.
And this interplay is so interesting because it reveals that Africa wasn't isolated. It was constantly interacting with North Africa, the Mediterranean, and even the Near East, leading to a rich exchange of ideas and practices.
Right. And it's like the North African conquest of Iberia brought a reintroduction of ancient knowledge back into Europe, with translations of works from medicine to algebra, which eventually helped fuel the Renaissance.
Exactly. And that ripple effect shows how deeply interconnected our world's history is, where the wealth of West African kingdoms literally helped spark major European developments.
Yeah. And on the flip side, the devastation wrought by the transatlantic slave trade disrupted this long history of self-directed development, causing immense human and intellectual loss that still affects the continent today.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking to think that the loss wasn't just in lives, but in the interruption of centuries of cultural
Yeah.
and economic progress, which rippled through history.
Mm-hmm. And the site even touches on how these brutal disruptions led to narratives that falsely claimed that Africans had no culture or history, a misconception that scholars are now working hard to correct.
Right. And it's so important we challenge those outdated views because
Yeah.
modern research continually shows that Africa's contribution to early human civilization is monumental.
Exactly. Like how the earliest evidence of our hominid ancestors comes straight from Africa, underscoring the continent's role as the actual cradle of humanity.
And it's fascinating that even the notion of early scientific achievements, like the Egyptians possibly understanding the brain's role long before the Greeks, adds layers to this rich narrative,
Yeah.
revealing how much was already established.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the wider scope, from infrastructure like irrigation systems to early written scripts, it really speaks to the sophisticated developments independent of European influence.
True, but I sometimes wonder if the archived status of this site might limit its accessibility and impact among newer generations, even though
Yeah.
the content itself is critically important.
That's a fair critique. It's like even though the resource is incredibly rich, the fact that it's archived means some links or resources might be obsolete, which could hinder its usefulness for educators and students today.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how digital preservation is as crucial as preserving the history itself, ensuring that these narratives remain accessible and influential for future generations.
Mm-hmm. Because once these vibrant accounts of African history are lost or forgotten, it not only misrepresents the past, but also devalues the contributions of millions of people throughout centuries, which is something we collectively need to combat.
Absolutely. So this discussion really underlines that understanding Africa's legacy isn't just about academic interest, but about setting the record straight in a world that's often skewed by colonial narratives.
Right. It's crucial to appreciate the continent's rich tapestry of achievements, from early state formation, influential trade routes, diverse governance systems, to groundbreaking advances in science and art, which together form a monumental chapter of human history.
And it's amazing how this deep dive into African history ultimately challenges and reshapes our global perspective, showing that history is constantly evolving as we uncover more evidence and reinterpret our shared past.
Exactly. And as we wrap up, it's like a call to action to continue exploring and preserving these narratives, making sure that Africa's story remains vibrant and integral to world history.